We can probably get started. We're 2 minutes past here, and these are only 30 minutes. So, Kathy, do you want to give us some updates?
Yes, and I apologize. I'm driving, so you won't have my video. And if I cut out, just let me know. I did meet with TCG briefly today, and Mike Cochran and I went through more of his spreadsheet work. There's a couple things that need fine-tuned. I'll give you an example. So one of the things he was doing was projecting out DMTRS, what your benefit would be at the retirement age, the IPERS retirement age. However, he misunderstood the contribution schedule for DMTRS, and he was changing it for every year instead of freezing the contribution schedule at the age of entrance into the plan. So he needs to do some updating of the model to reflect a couple of items similar to that. And then we'll meet again, and hopefully we'll be comfortable with the numbers in his model, and then we can start looking at that further. And my ask of TCG is not just to present me with a model, but to present me with some recommendations according to the model. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, thank you, Kathy. I really would appreciate some recommendations. We don't need any more people explaining to us what we already know. And we certainly understand the complexities of this model more than probably most. And I hope they have some ideas that we haven't thought of, or a way of putting together the ideas we have thought of in new ways that will actually help us move forward. Because we have a lot of different ideas that we've not been able to weave together into a strategy. And so we've just been spinning. And I think we're going to need a strategy in the end. So I hope they'll give us not just do this, but a set of strategy or set of recommendations we can put together into a comprehensive strategy to close this program down and still take care of everyone who's dependent on it.
Can I ask, will there be a longer meeting where we will look at the model, work through the model, ask questions, perhaps have TCG here as well? And I guess my secondary, I hope that the answer to that question is yes, might that possibly be the Wednesday after spring break, March the 23rd, where we might work on having a longer, more traditional meeting where we can try to have a more formal agenda, hopefully also get as much information out to actives and retirees as possible. Am I on track there? Is that reasonable?
I think you're on track. I think we will need a longer meeting to kind of discuss some of their findings and recommendations. The spreadsheet is pretty involved. I think we can go over the basics of it, but as far as digging into, every individual formula, I'm not sure that that's really a good use of time. But certainly if people have questions about how something was figured, I think TCG can answer that. I'm not sure that, again, it's prudent for them to show us, this was my formula. I think they can talk more conceptually.
I would think like 3 different levels here. There's sort of like the level at which you're engaging them, where you're kind of checking the formulas to make sure it's consistent with your understanding of the plan. And I think there's sort of the interim step where we get to see it as a group, like our smaller group here. We get into some of the details. We're not looking at formulas, but we're asking questions. We're asking for sensitivities. We're still sort of at a tactical sort of stage. Then I think when we bring in like a larger group, it's got to be brought up to a much higher level, because a lot of that audience isn't going to be as in the know on this plan as we are. And so I think of it as sort of like maybe a 2 more steps after you, Kathy, and the TCG folks are kind of at a good spot. There's sort of like the tactical group that we have here. Then there's the broader group where we're going to bring everything up a level and be a little bit less technical. Does that resonate with the group?
It does for me, Brad. Whoops, go ahead, Jessica.
Go ahead, Lola.
It's Lola. So
Okay,
we're talking just about phase 1. That's the first thing they're bringing back to us, correct? Just phase 1. the actives.
What I'm asking for is right now they're just working on the spreadsheet. That's all they've done. They haven't taken the spreadsheet and said it costs X to do what you want to do, and this is how we think you should do it. And once you do that, then this is what you should do with the next group. We haven't gotten that far at all. We're still on the spreadsheet, but my ask of them is the second piece. Once you get that number, whatever that number is, then give us some strategies to get to there. And to me, that should include phase 1 and phase 2.
And
Because
so with
depending
phase-
upon what phase 1 is, it will
Okay.
determine what phase 2 is. If phase 1 is that we do something completely outside the plan, then phase 2 is going to change course from if phase 1 is we're going to move everybody completely out of the plan and take their money, then phase 2 is a little different. So I think we have to kind of figure out what phase 1 is, or different options for phase 1. And if phase 1 is A, then phase 2 can be this. But if it's B, then phase 2 should be this type of thing.
So
I
I was just wondering, so they will be running the numbers for retireds as they are for the actives? The comparison of what retired DMTRS and IPERS, the comparison? Or is that to be
No.
decided? I mean,
That is currently not being done. Currently, they are looking at actives only in
Okay.
a comparison, since retirees have already initiated their benefit.
okay,
So-
but there's still a big comparison that I would like TCG to have an understanding that it's not just the actives, it's all of us, and that we come with, harm done to us, even though we're retired, we still have some deficits there, not due to our own undertaking. It was not our fault that we were not funded as IPERS members were. And I think there are things that TCG need to hopefully understand, that there's discrepancy between the retired IPERS and the retired DMTRS. Just my input here.
I appreciate that, Lola, a lot. But can I also add that when we decided we weren't taking any new members into the plan, we have effectively said that this plan will end at some
Correct.
point, right?
Correct.
So this plan is now a finite plan, and we need to have a strategy for how it will end, and still take care of all of our people, right? Like,
Correct.
so I appreciate what you're saying. So when I said, we need to shut down the plan, that's what I meant. Is that we've already decided to shut it down. It is in the process of shutting down now. How long that takes and what form that takes is undecided, and we just can't let it fall to chance, and just can't let it just sort of happen. We need to be a little bit more strategic and have some ideas in mind about what are we going to do, because these are not unknown things, right? Like, these are not, we haven't, there's some variability, of course, but these are not unknown things. These are things that are knowable. These are things that are actionable, that we could figure this out, but we just haven't been able to weave together a strategy for closing the plan down, because we've already decided to close it down, whether that takes us 30 years or not. It's still, we've decided to close the plan. I'm sorry, Kathy, go ahead.
You're
Kathy,
good.
go ahead, Kathy.
I don't have anything further to add to that piece.
Oh, Kathy, my question is do you see the possibility of the formula that is currently being used and that we're just looking at actives, could it be applied to the retired members' accounts so that we have that ability to identify where the gap is and is not, so that, again, we have a more holistic picture? I know that there were, multiple board members who sort of expressed that desire to see the full 360 view of what all of this is going to take. And I think part of the question will be, how is the discrepancy in retirement different for someone who's still employed versus someone who left 30 years ago? And I can't answer that question. I only know, as you work with individual members' accounts, and I certainly don't feel strong in saying that this is the gap that every person has, but I think it's a question that we're going to be asked that I think we need to answer.
Absolutely.
And to add to that, the scope of work from the original agreement, I don't think takes that into account. So I will need to talk to TCG and talk to Tom and Shashank regarding that request, because the way I read the current agreement, they're looking at phase 2 was more to figure out how to continue to pay the retirees, whether it's within the plan or doing purchasing outside annuities, but it wasn't to look at their gap in payment. So if that's something that is being requested, that would be a change in scope or an addition to scope.
Hmm.
Do you need action from us, Kathy? Do we need action from the school board members on that?
It's a really good question. I don't know. Shashank will be back on Monday, or he'll be back in the country on Monday, and I think back in the office on Tuesday. Let me ask him how to proceed with that piece, because I don't know. I don't have the ability to amend a contract. And that's what I'm working with right now, is a contract that's already laid out scope. And so I don't really have the ability to amend that to include something else. So that would be a Tom and Shashank question or amendment.
The district is funding the study, so it's not coming out of our plan dollars. So
right.
I think they would have the final say about whether or not it would expand the scope or not.
Well, needless to say, there are numerous retired people who are very concerned about how this is going to affect them. And they don't want to be just done to. They feel like they've been done to over the years, and they've had to tolerate it. And they just don't want that to be another situation. And I don't mean to elongate this meeting, or, I'm reading body language, and I'm sorry, but just thank you for putting that out there. And just please consider that for all the retireds that are very concerned. And also, I would say the communication that we're supposedly getting out to members, we really need that before. I mean, they need to all know how to get on. We don't have the ability, like you, to access everyone so that everybody feels in the know. I'm just like, I don't know how to help with that, but that really needs to happen.
So,
yeah, I've had some retirees that I know who are in the plan who were worried that DMTRS is being shipped to Texas because they said TCG was from Texas. And so, I mean, that's a legitimate fear. I mean, when you're dealing with people's lifelines, that's a legitimate fear. But they just didn't know. And so I sent the link that was on YouTube from the work session with the school board. I said, well, here's what we discussed, and this is what it's about. And we're not moving to TCG, but we've hired them. The district has hired them to do this analysis for us to understand the scope of the problem and come up with some strategies to help us resolve it. But our strategies need to be comprehensive, not just for actives, but for retirees too, because no matter what, the plan is ending, and we need to have a strategy, a process for handling that for our actives and our inactive actives and our retirees who are probably also quite active.
So I know we didn't have a formal agenda, so this is not necessarily for an official vote per se, but I guess I want to ask Brad, Barb, Melissa, Jessica, Lola, myself, and Jan, do any of us have an objection to the request that goes through Kathy back to Shashank and Dr. Ahart that we want to see an analysis done for retirees that is as close to or equivalent to what we're doing for active, so that we all clearly have the picture of the financial deficits and gaps?
The only hesitation I have about that, Blake, is time. We have postponed. 10 years of investment time has been lost to me. So going back and saying we're going to expand the scope and it's going to take a few more months and a year later we're still sitting here having this conversation, I might lose my mind. Okay, so it might be helpful to say we recommend that we also need to do this study, but I don't know if we need to expand the scope of the contract, because dang it, one more time that we delay, we just can't, we got to stop delaying. That's where I'm at with it right now.
I think phases make sense potentially to get the active, that part of the process complete. And then I think the other thing probably to consider before making that request is there an action that we have in mind that could be supported by that analysis? Like, are we going to take that information and make a new recommendation around additional compensation? I just wonder kind of what is the action step we think is going to come from a study on the retireds.
Well, I would say that that is something that many retired people would like to have versus the unstable excess earnings. So, that's one thing. I guess a couple thoughts is, it's the more recent retirees that have been impacted. So it wouldn't be all 800 people, it would be the more recent. And then we also have the numbers and the statistics from 2007 when increases were made, and it talks about the discrepancies then, and that report might be something that would be helpful in doing the analysis as well.
And I was wondering if the analysis would be different in the sense of those that retired after 30 years or 35 years or 40 years, a comparison with IPERS members who retired at those years also, rather than maybe 400, 500, 600, 800 individual. And the 4.5% people, that's quite a loss in income compared to the members that are retired members who are receiving 5.5%, even though that is a small group.
Yeah.
There's quite a difference in what their income is.
Yeah.
So
each month.
Is the thought you'd be seeking additional compensation, or is it more if there was like a plan transformation where the plan gets like sold to an insurance company, is administered in a different form? You want to understand what that would look like?
Absolutely, and hopefully
The latter. Okay.
Yeah,
So I think what you could do in that situation, rather than paying somebody to do an analysis for you, would be to, and this is like several steps down the road probably, but like look to take the plan to market and get bids on what different insurers would do with this plan. I don't think you necessarily need to pay for that analysis and then bring that to an insurance company and have them say, we like that, we don't like that. You just take it to market and see what they come back to you with. But Kathy's probably banging her head against her steering wheel, thinking about all the stuff that I'm jumping ahead on. There's a lot of steps to get to that point, but that's the route that I would consider, as opposed to trying to get this in with the actives analysis and potentially slow that down further.
Okay.
Brad, do you think that that's something that insurance companies would be interested in purchasing at this point? I mean, would there be a market for our plan? I think there have been times we've talked about in the past that there hasn't been, so I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, as constructed, it would raise some eyebrows, I think, but the market, I think, right now is pretty hungry for these sorts of plans. Just speaking, and again, this is sort of like the whole disclaimer that I work for Principal, and Principal does this kind of business. I'm not involved with that, but this is my observation.
Sure.
Separation, disclaimer, etc. Principal has had a hard time competing on some of the stuff because there are more entrants into the space competing for pension plans. And it mostly comes from like asset managers. It would be sort of in the same line of business as BTC. being really hungry for sources of capital to employ their investment strategies. So they get into really funky stuff that's, private equity and structured assets and all this stuff that you can still make some money originating and developing and selling to the market. Pension plans are a great way to do that because just like that, you can have $250 million of capital to deploy relatively quickly. And so there's a market for that for sure.
Okay.
The market's getting tighter, which is good for you. And so, you'd rather have equity markets higher and rates probably higher to get a better bid on your plan. But, time is kind of the essence here. So I think there is a market for that.
Brad, I was just going to say, I think it probably makes sense after listening to Jessica and yourself of let's see what the active report looks like before we spend more money to see what that may produce, because it may be worthwhile or it may not be worthwhile. And so I just think there's a lot of other factors that go into it. And I echo Jessica's concern. I think the way that we help retirees is to figure out the actives first, and then let's see where we go from there. And that's no disrespect to our retired folks. It's just, I think that's what we need to do first, figure it out, and then let's see if we can multiply it.
Sampling the wine before you buy a bottle. That makes sense.
Right.
Yeah, and I want to chime in. For me, the whole discussion of what's right and what's not right and what's actionable for retirees, I really struggle with. I struggle with a group that for me that I identify as being much more deficited, being the 2018-19 group. Those folks who were told we're moving, and then they make the decision that they're going to retire, spend 8 months at their job knowing that they're going to retire. And then, yes, we gave them the opportunity to come back to work. That group was harmed a lot. For me, I struggle with is there a line to be drawn? And so I actually appreciate the notion of, do we need to do that retirement analysis for everyone in the plan? No.
Yeah, agree.
But how do we articulate where there's a more obvious group of folks within this DMTRS plan that we say we at minimum owe a serious conversation and plan for 18-19 people? That would be a group that stands out to me. Now, the group that just retired that had the retirement incentive, yes, the retirement incentive didn't close the gap. However, that was, our school board and our committee worked hard. That was their pension reform. And so I don't want to spend as much time there, but I struggle with how far back the line goes, but I also struggle to say drive the active group all the way forward, because I'm going to be really honest, I'm worried that the end result for retirees is just, let's just come up with something and get rid of it. And then we've left a group of people that all of us in here know did not get treated well, right, and were not taken care of. And so I don't know if maybe, Barb, Lola, and maybe with Gordon's help as well, if there's, I don't know exactly who all or where to start at, but are there some starting points that we can send to Kathy and say, this group for sure, we've got to do something, whatever that may or may not be, and then figure out, kind of work our way. That group may get bigger, but it may not. But for me, that's the group. And for me, then I end up creating this discussion about retirees in general, because I have a much shorter knowledge base, given that I've only been in this role for a couple of years. I don't know whether someone in 2013 or 2007 or 2001 or 19, I don't know that quite as well as I do in 18-19. That group is, in my opinion, owed exactly what we're doing for anybody else, either through the plan that's coming forward or for what we did for the group that just retired and got the retirement incentive. That's my 2 cents.
Blake, and I think that's something that would be considered down the road, and I know I won't be popular for saying this, but I think you would have to look to see if there was a retirement incentive offered those other years outside of that would factor in, knowing that it didn't close the gap, but there was a significant retirement incentive for many years that was offered. But we
I
can deal with
agree
that
with
later.
that, but IPERS members also got the same retirement incentive, so it
Barb,
wasn't
I
different.
totally agree, because that's
Okay,
Blake
so
and I had
just-
that conversation the other night. Yes.
Yeah, so just making sure that, you know,
ma'am.
so the gap is no different. It's still a gap.
Yep, I'm on Barb's side of that one, and I'm not on Doug's side of that one.
Thank you. Yeah.
Kathy, is any of that actionable? Is there any of that that we can help? I mean, I know that we just threw like lots of mud all over the place, and now we're trying to clean up a little bit.
I'm going to be honest. I think for the immediate term, I'm going to continue to work on the actives and continue with TCG on that path, and try to weave in some conversations with Tom and Shashank when Shashank gets back in the office about this ask from the retiree group. But I'm not going to hold up the work that we're currently doing.
Yeah, that's fair.
Waiting for an answer.
Okay.
Does the 2 rounds of meetings beyond this group sound good to you, Kathy?
It does. I would propose probably that I need to have an initial one with Tom and Shashank, and perhaps Terry as the board person prior to meeting with this committee. And
Sounds
then
good.
doing the committee meeting, and perhaps maybe then circling back to those 3 and then doing a large meeting. But I think they're an integral part of this decision, and we need to keep them on board and informed so we can keep it moving in a positive direction.
Sounds good. Maybe just one last thing on this topic. Does the news about Tom make us need to think about multiple avenues of keeping momentum here? Because he's been sort of an advocate recently for this, and if he's departing, is there anything we need to do to make sure that we have all the other influential folks kind of lined up so we don't get kind of stuck at some point?
Well, I think the fact that we had the work session with the full board helps a lot, because it's now on the radar. I don't know who the interim will be. I have a presumption, but I don't know if that's been decided. So we could, if once we know who that interim is for sure, then we can go from there. But
Brad, that's a good question. I had that conversation with Chairwoman Bradley last night after the board meeting, because I have heard concerns that all this work is going to stop now that Tom is done June 30. And I assured her that that was not the case, that we still have not lost focus. And so I know the support of the board is there, but I think Jessica's right. They're going to lay out a plan to announce an interim in the next 2 weeks. And then I think once an interim is announced, we do have the responsibility to bring them in, and Kathy and the board, and just make sure that we know that this is a focus, it's a priority, and it's going to be your priority. So that's I feel old now in this role after almost 12 years living through a superintendent search before, right, Melissa Spencer? And so I'm not as worked up as others are, but I understand the nerve-wracking effect it could have on folks. Maybe that's why I'm fat, gray, and ugly. I don't know, but that's just the way it is. So we'll get through it.
turn your camera on so we can believe that, Doug.
At least you still have your hair.
Before we depart, do we have an update on the communication that was going to go out to retired members?
That's what I asked about.
Not an update that has moved very rapidly, and I apologize. There's been a few things that have taken my time unexpectedly this last week, and week before. I have a drafted communication ready to go out that gives them just a kind of an overview of what we're doing with TCG, and then directions on how to access the portal. And I think what I'm trying to do is, or want to do, is then get an email link or an email address that would be just DMTRS specific, and that they could send their email address to that, and then I can just have a DMTRS email rather than trying to commingle it with all my other emails. And so giving them that option then when I send out the letter to say, here's what you may have heard, we're doing this TCG study. This is what kind of the scope of it. Because of the need to communicate on short-term, within short time frames and the inability to do that through US mail, here's the directions on how to access board docs. And if you would provide us with an email, here's an email address that you can do that. So it's been a little slower than I anticipated, and I apologize, but I am working on it. It's just, there's a lot of things unfortunately going on right now. And I know I don't want to be making excuses. It's reality.
I will add that if you are able to accelerate in the next 24 hours, that tomorrow at 6:15 at Kurt's building, Kathy, there would be some people available to fold and stuff. I know that that's a lot, but I'm just telling you that will be available, as we will have a captive audience of about a dozen. And the rest of you are wondering what I'm talking about, is because we bargain tomorrow night and there's always this nice lull in between things. And
Sure.
so in all seriousness, I know that that's a lot, but if it can be there, you have an army to help you, Kathy, tomorrow night.
And they'll be happy because we're ordering Board and Arrows pizza for dinner. So that'll just be.
And anything that's not done, Doug can stay behind and do.
Absolutely.
Oh, well, then I'll do a whole bunch of stuff if Doug's going to stay behind and do it. I don't know, Blake, that it'll be ready because I am in depositions all day tomorrow. And I have been the last 2 days. So yeah, but I will try my best. I just need some more hours in the day. And that's all I'm asking. I don't think that's much.
Happy to help with that, Kathy, when it gets ready.
Yeah.
Yes, and I
And I'm in
appreciate
the
everybody's
office.
offers. I really do. I just need to get the communication finalized and make sure that I have a working email address and link and that everything works correctly before I send it out, because that will just increase people's frustrations if it doesn't work.
Kathy, this is Rosie. I'm in the office, so please feel free to pop over anytime that you need anything. I'm more than willing to stuff envelopes, or if you need me to make 100 calls, I have time in the day, so I can definitely help you guys with that. To reach some of the harder to reach members. So,
Thank you. And I totally appreciate everybody's help. I'll lock myself away tonight and try to finalize that communication. And then if I could at least even get it sent over to get printed, I might be able. We'll see what I can do for tomorrow. I'll try my best.
Well, Kathy, I know it's a lot recently, so thank you so much for that. And I do hope that you will also put your computer down a little bit today and have some time in the sunshine while there's still sun, because we just need a little sunlight. It's been a heck of a road recently.
She's going to play.
I did during the breaks. Well, the breaks during my depositions today, they were on the 16th floor of the EMC building. So I did go out on the little balcony and stand out there and get a little fresh air. So it was good.
Good.
But yeah, I'll get to it. So hopefully, like I said, I'll aim for tomorrow. If I can't, I will aim for sure to have something out within a week from now, for sure. At the latest, very latest.
Thank you.
So. All right. I don't have anything more to update everybody on. I will continue to work with TCG on the actives. I will talk to Tom and Shashank regarding the retiree requests, and I will update you next Wednesday.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you.
Are we meeting during spring break? Are we meeting March 16th during spring break?
I won't be here.
No.
I'm actually, that's a good point. I'm not available next Wednesday either. We're traveling Wednesday to Wednesday, so.
Well, you don't want to take us along with you?
You want to help me with the kids in the plane? That'd be great.
It depends where you're going. I might be up for
I
it.
feel you, Brad. We're also flying next Saturday. Yeah.
It's better than driving to Florida. So.
Yes.
So do we think it may be worthwhile to wait 2 weeks then? Or 3? It'd be 3, wouldn't it? 1, 2, 3.
Maybe some
I could
email
do
updates
next
if you have
Wednesday.
anything.
We can still do the update next week, even if Brad's not here. I think we should continue that cadence. It's helpful because we have been able to catch a number of errors in the model before they get too far down the line, and then we go, oops. So that's actually been helpful. So I think an update next week is fine, but then the week after we just take a little break, and everybody just enjoy a little break, and then we'll come back to our weekly cadence.
That sounds good. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Good night, friends.
Bye.